Some deals feel like business, and some deals feel like someone quietly tightening a rope around your neck while they smile at you from across the table. Keanu had spent 3 years trying to pretend his hands were clean. The smell of oil and gasoline had become his new perfume, the little auto shop on the edge of the city his sanctuary. People came in angry about broken engines and left calmer, grateful, sometimes even laughing. He liked that. Fixing cars made sense. You listened, you found the problem, you tightened what was loose and replaced what was broken. No blood, no screaming, just bolts and metal and honest work. Sandra sat on the low concrete wall outside the shop, watching him through the open bay door, a paper cup of coffee between her hands. She had that look again, half proud, half worried. The look of someone who had seen a man crawl out of hell and was afraid the fire might still be chasing him. "You're thinking too loud," Keanu said, wiping his hands on a rag as he walked over. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're the one who keeps leaving the garage door open. The past can walk right in, you know." He tried to brush it off with a crooked grin. The past can't afford an oil change. But the truth lived behind his eyes. They both knew the name that sat between them in every quiet moment. Han, the Korean crime boss who had built an empire on fear and precision, who never raised his voice because he never needed to. Men like Han didn't shout. They signed papers, gave nods, and people disappeared. Keanu used to be one of the shadows that moved when Han nodded. He had walked away after his younger brother died on a job gone wrong. It wasn't supposed to be violent, just a message. But messages in that world were written with bullets. Keanu had watched the light leave his brother's eyes on a cold warehouse floor and realized there was no clean way to work for a man like Han. So he did the one thing you weren't supposed to do. He survived, and then he left. Sandra met him months later at a community center where she volunteered, translating for families who were trying to keep their kids away from gangs. Keanu had come in with a busted lip and a quiet desperation, asking if anyone knew where he could find honest work. She had believed him when he said he was done with violence, even when nobody else did. That belief was why she was sitting outside his shop now, watching the early evening light fade, feeling a strange pressure in her chest she couldn't name. Some part of her had learned to listen to that pressure. It had saved her life more than once. She looked up when she heard the engines. Not customers. Too smooth, too synchronized. Two black sedans, tinted windows, gliding to a stop like they were arriving at a funeral where they already knew the name on the stone. Keanu heard them too. His jaw tightened for half a second before his expression went blank, the way it used to when the world turned dangerous. Old instincts didn't die, they just waited. 3 men stepped out. Dark suits, the kind that moved without a wrinkle. No visible guns, which somehow made it worse. The man in front adjusted his cufflinks as he walked toward the open bay door, eyes scanning, not curious, just confirming what he already knew. "Keanu," he said, as if they were old business partners and this was a friendly visit. Keanu didn't move. Shop S closed. The man smiled politely. For everyone else, maybe, not for Mr. Han. Sandra stood up. "We're not interested," she said quietly, voice steady despite the fear thudding in her ribs. The man finally looked at her like he was cataloging a detail he already had in his file. "Ms. Sandra Alvarez, your mother's condition has stabilized, hasn't it? Hospital bills are difficult. Mr. Han is always impressed by those who take care of their family." The way he said it made her stomach twist. They knew everything, of course they did. Keanu stepped slightly in front of her, not aggressively, just enough to place his body between hers and the men. "Tell Han I paid my debt, I'm out." The man's eyes cooled. "If you were out, I wouldn't be here." He reached into his jacket slowly and pulled out a small black envelope, setting it on the workbench without breaking eye contact. "Mr. Han is disappointed. He would like to speak with you, both of you, now." Sandra's throat went dry. "And if we say no?" He didn't answer. He just glanced at the envelope and then at the street. 2 kids from the neighborhood were playing soccer with a dented old ball, laughing, their voices cutting through the thick air. Keanu coached them sometimes after work, gave them snacks, patched their bikes. They trusted him. The man let the implication hang in the air like smoke. Kindness was a beautiful thing, Sandra thought. It also made you vulnerable in a world run by men like Han. They never threatened only you. They threatened everything you loved. Keanu knew it too. She saw the moment the fight left his shoulders, replaced not with surrender but with a grim acceptance. The kind that comes when you realize there is no safe choice, only less terrible ones. He nodded once, "We'll come." The ride to Han's building was silent. City lights slid across the car windows, neon and concrete reflecting hollow versions of a life that looked normal from far away. Sandra watched Keanu's reflection more than the streets. His eyes were focused, jaw set, but there was something else there too, a quiet, stubborn softness that no amount of violence had managed to kill. It was what she loved most about him and what terrified her now, because men like Han saw softness as a flaw to be punished. She reached for his hand, fingers cold against his rough knuckles. He glanced at her, the corners of his mouth twitching up just enough to say, "I'm still here." She squeezed back, silently answering, "Then don't leave again." Han's office was at the top of a glass tower that looked like it had grown straight out of the city's ambition. The elevator ride felt endless, the numbers climbing with heavy, mechanical finality. When the doors slid open, they stepped into quiet luxury. Dark wood, soft lighting, a skyline that stretched out like a prize. Han sat behind a wide desk, not cluttered, just precise. Stacks of cash sat neat as bricks in front of him beside a small black pistol laid out like a pen. Two men stood behind him, still and watchful. His suit was charcoal, his tie simple, his expression almost gentle. "Keanu," he said, voice warm, as if welcoming home a favorite son. "You look peaceful, it doesn't suit you." Keanu bowed his head slightly, just enough to be polite without surrendering. "You called, I came." Han's eyes shifted to Sandra. "And you brought your conscience." He let the words hang like a joke that wasn't quite a joke. "Sandra, it's good to finally meet you in person. You've been a stabilizing influence." She kept her chin level. "I help him stay out of trouble, that's all." Han smiled faintly. "Out of trouble, is that what you tell yourself?" There was no point challenging him. She stayed silent. Han folded his hands. "Let us not waste time. Time, as you will soon feel, is very precious." He nodded toward the man who had come to the shop. The man stepped forward and placed a thin folder and a phone on the desk. "The ledgers were stolen," Han said calmly. "Years of accounts. Names, numbers, routes, not just mine, but those of men who trust me. Men who will hurt many innocent people if they believe I failed them." He opened the folder. A grainy photograph showed a man in his 30s, plain black hair, glasses, the kind of face you would forget on a train. Under it, a name, Min Jae Park. "This man took them," Han continued. "He is hiding in the city, protected by people who believe he is some kind of hero, a whistleblower." The word tasted bitter in his mouth. "You know how foolish the world can be." He slid the photo across the desk toward Keanu. "You will find him, you will bring him to me, alive, and you will do it in 24 hours. Keanu stared at the photograph, the timer already ticking in his head. 24 hours is not much for a city this size. "That is why I chose you." Han's eyes were kind, but his voice was stone. "You are efficient when properly motivated." Sandra felt the air shift, a storm building behind the calm words. "What happens if he does?" she asked, though she knew she would hate the answer. Han looked at her almost sadly. "You ask as if you do not already know the kind of man I am." He picked up the phone and tapped the screen. An image appeared. Sandra's heart clenched. It was the community center, kids laughing in the courtyard, a timestamp from that afternoon. "We live in a small world," Han said softly. "Your mother's hospital, your young friends from the shop, the kind woman who runs your support group, so many fragile pieces on the board." He set the phone down. "If Minyi is not in this room alive by this time tomorrow, I will assume you chose a peaceful life over their lives, and I will act accordingly." Sandra swallowed hard. Fear tasted like metal on her tongue. "You could have asked the police to find him," she said quietly. "Or any of your people, why us?" Han's gaze sharpened. "Because I do not believe Minyi is what he seems, and neither are you." He turned the folder around. There, paperclipped to the back, was a photograph Sandra had prayed nobody in this world ever found. She was younger, her hair shorter, wearing a plain jacket with a small government badge partially visible near her collar, the logo of an anti-corruption unit. Han spoke gently. Undercover work leaves shadows, Sandra. You tried to expose certain men a few years ago, didn't you? Men who were not me, but who are now very interested in both of you. Keanu's head snapped toward her. Shock flashed across his face, followed quickly by hurt that he tried to hide. You never told me. Her chest tightened. Not here, not like this. Han watched them with cold curiosity, like a scientist observing a chemical reaction. Min-Yi Park is also an informant, he said, which means there are police, prosecutors, maybe even journalists waiting for him. If anyone else finds him first, all of my secrets become public. My enemies grow stronger, my business burns. And when men like me burn, we do not burn alone. He leaned back. So you see, Keanu, this is very inspiring. You and Sandra started new lives, convinced you were better than the world you left behind. Now you will prove it. Bring me the traitor. Save the innocent people your choices put in danger. Be the hero you think you are. Sandra's heart hammered. Something was wrong. The timeline, the information. The way Han focused on her more than on the photo of Min-Yi. She replayed his words in her mind, the years she had spent learning to read lies and half-truths humming at the base of her skull. He doesn't care about the ledgers, she realized, a cold wave washing through her. Not really. He's already moved the money, shifted the names. This is about something else. Her eyes drifted to the stacks of cash on the desk. New bands, new series of bills, too new for ledgers that were supposedly gone for weeks. And the pistol beside them, safety off, angled toward the door, not toward Han, as if he expected someone to rush in, as if tonight, right now, was when something big was supposed to happen. Her instincts screamed, this room wasn't just a meeting, it was a stage. Han's attention snapped back to Keanu. You have 24 hours, he repeated quietly, sliding the phone toward him. On its screen, a red countdown began at 24:00:00 and started to fall. Every hour I will send you a picture, Han said, so you remember who depends on your success. Keanu picked up the phone. The weight of it felt heavier than any gun he'd ever carried. He nodded once. I'll bring him. Sandra stared at him, her mind racing, heart pulling in the opposite direction. Bringing Min-Yi here meant delivering another person into the hands of a man who erased problems. But refusing meant kids in the courtyard, her mother in that hospital bed, people who had never chosen this war. Han studied her face, and for a moment his expression softened almost like pity. You know something he doesn't, he said quietly. That is why your eyes are louder than your voice right now. Sandra forced herself to breathe evenly. I know this is a trap, she said finally, meeting his gaze, but I don't know yet who it's really for. Han's smile was small and unreadable. Then you have 24 hours to figure it out. The man in the suit opened the door behind them. The meeting was over. Keanu placed a hand on the small of Sandra's back, guiding her toward the hallway, the countdown already burning in his pocket. The door closed behind them with a quiet click that felt like a vault ceiling shut. In the solitude of the elevator, with the city's lights glinting beyond the glass walls, Keanu turned to her. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, voice low, pain threading each word. About the badge, about who you used to be. She looked up at him, eyes bright with unshed tears and a rising terror that had nothing to do with Han's threats and everything to do with what she had just realized. Because, she whispered, voice shaking, if I told you the whole truth, you'd understand that Min-Yi isn't just some informant to me. Keanu frowned. What are you saying, Sandra? Her hand trembled as she pressed it flat against the cold glass of the elevator wall, the city blurring beyond it. For years, she had kept this one secret locked away, believing it would keep him safe. Now it felt like the key to a trap closing around them. I'm saying, she forced out, barely above a whisper, that the man Han wants you to deliver is the one person I swore I would never let him touch. She turned to meet his eyes fully, the weight of her confession crashing down between them. Keanu, Min-Yi Park is the reason I ever got close to Han's world. He's the informant I failed to protect the first time. And this time, he's my little brother. The elevator doors slid open into the parking garage, and the city's night air felt thinner than it had an hour ago. Keanu walked beside Sandra, the countdown in his pocket pulsing like a second heartbeat. 23 hours, 42 minutes. And now, a new truth that hurt more than any threat Han had made. "Your brother," he said quietly as they crossed the concrete toward the car. "How long have you known he was alive?" Sandra unlocked the car with shaking fingers. "I didn't," she said. "Not for sure. After the operation fell apart, they told me he ran, that he vanished. I thought maybe he crossed the border, changed his name, anything. I stopped asking questions because every question made him a bigger target." "And the photo?" Keanu pressed. There was no anger in his voice, just a tired ache. Han had it like it was nothing. "Because someone sold us out," she answered. "Back then and now." She slid into the driver's seat and gripped the wheel, fighting to steady her breath. "Min Yi was my first informant, my only one. He trusted me to protect him. I failed. I couldn't fail him again, so I never told anyone he existed, not even you." Keanu leaned back, staring at the low ceiling of the garage. The memory of his own brother on that warehouse floor rose up like smoke. "You thought if you buried the story, he'd stay safe." "I thought if I stopped looking, Han would stop hunting," she whispered. "But he didn't. He just waited for the right bait." He turned his head toward her. "Me." She nodded, eyes shining. "You were the one ex-soldier who walked away from Han and stayed alive. Clean record, new job, helping kids. You became visible. If Han put you on a leash again, every decent cop, every scared witness, every kid who thinks you're a hero, he gets to own them too." Keanu exhaled slowly. "So this isn't about one ledger, it's about control." "It's about making examples," Sandra said. "Min Yi for betraying him, you for trying to change, me for thinking the law could touch him." Silence filled the car for a long moment. Then Keanu spoke, his voice low but steady. "We're not delivering your brother to him." She looked at him, caught between relief and fear. "If we don't, he kills the kids, my mom, everyone at the center. You saw his eyes, he doesn't bluff." "Then we don't play by his rules," Keanu said. "We find Min Yi first, we get the truth, and then we make a new plan." "You think we can outplay Han in his own city in less than a day?" Sandra asked. A bitter laugh caught behind her teeth. "I think," Keanu answered, "that I'd rather die trying to protect your brother than live with another one on my conscience." The vulnerability in his words cut through her panic. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was trying not to be a weapon anymore. That humility, that quiet willingness to carry blame that wasn't only his, made something inside her soften and sharpen at the same time. She nodded once. "Then we start where Min Yi would go if everything went wrong." Keanu frowned. "Where is that?" "Somewhere he knew I'd find him," she whispered. "If I was still alive." She turned the key, engine rumbling to life. As they pulled out, Keanu checked the rearview mirror. A pair of headlights fell in behind them, too steady, too patient. "Don't look now," he murmured, "but Han's not giving us much privacy." Sandra glanced at the mirror, jaw tightening. "Of course he is. He wants us to lead him straight to Min Yi." Keanu's fingers drummed lightly on his knee, calculating turns, side streets, angles. "Hold tight," he said quietly. "If we're going to save anybody, we have to disappear first." Sandra's hands tightened on the wheel as he reached over, yanked the emergency brake just enough to swing the car across 2 lanes, and aimed them straight toward a narrow alley that looked too tight for mercy. The pursuing headlights surged closer as concrete walls rushed up on both sides, and in that breath before impact, neither of them knew if they were about to lose Han's tail. Or their lives. The car scraped through the alley with a scream of metal, mirrors folding in, sparks flaring against the walls. Sandra held her breath, knuckles white on the wheel. Behind them, brakes shrieked. The black sedan tried to follow, clipped the corner, and slammed sideways into a dumpster. For a moment, the world was nothing but echoing impact and flying trash. They shot out the other end of the alley, alive, the city opening up like a guilty conscience. Keanu twisted in his seat, checking the rear window. No headlights, no pursuit, just darkness and the distant honk of some other life going on as usual. "We're clear, for now." Sandra's laugh came out shaky and disbelieving. You just scraped half the paint off my car. Good thing I know a mechanic, he said, and the tiny spark of humor between them was enough to let their shoulders drop an inch. They drove in tense silence until the streets grew older, quieter. Sandra turned onto a road lined with shuttered shops and faded murals. Finally, she pulled up beside a worn brick building with stained glass windows and a wooden cross leaning tiredly atop the roof. Here, Keanu asked. She nodded. This church used to run night classes for kids who couldn't afford school. ESL, math, citizenship stuff. Minyi and I would meet in the back room. Nobody looked twice at a girl helping her cousin with his English. She led him around the side entrance, the old door creaking as she pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled of dust, wax, and faint incense. A single lamp burned near the altar. They walked down a narrow hallway to a small storage room. Sandra's breath caught. On the table beside a stack of hymn books lay a folded jacket she recognized. Gray, too big for the hanger. Next to it, a cheap phone and a simple spiral notebook. "He's been here," she whispered, reaching for the notebook with trembling fingers. Keanu hovered near the door, watching the empty corners. "Check the dates." She flipped the cover open. Her name was written at the top in familiar, cramped handwriting. No formal greeting, just, "This." If you're reading this, it means Han finally found a way to pull you back toward him. "I'm sorry. This was never supposed to touch you again." Her lips moved silently as she read, the words cutting deeper with every line. Minyi had stayed in the city, watching from the edges, the community center, the garage, her walking routes, making sure Han's men stayed away, gathering proof that the corruption they tried to expose had crawled even higher up the chain. The ledgers are not just money. They are a map of everyone Han owns. Some wear badges, some wear robes, some sign your paychecks. He described a final plan, one massive leak sent to every outlet at once. Names, dates, transfers, enough to shake institutions, not just streets, but there was a cost. If I push send, they don't come for Han first. They come for people like you. So I've been waiting for a spark big enough to light the whole thing at once. Sandra swallowed hard. He's been protecting us from a distance this whole time. Keanu stepped closer, reading over her shoulder. "He calls you the spark," he murmured, pointing to a line. "If she's still alive, she'll know what to do. She always did, even when I didn't listen." A soft, pained smile tugged at her mouth. "He used to say that when we were kids, every time I fixed his homework 5 minutes before class." "Where would he go to send something this big?" Keanu asked. "Not from a public Wi-Fi, not his own place. Somewhere with power, maybe physical access to Han's network." Sandra took a slow breath, piecing it together. "The shipping yard. Han keeps his cold storage servers near the docks, less visible, harder to subpoena." "He taps his own vault to break into his accounts," Keanu said. "Smart." "Stupid," Sandra corrected softly, "because now we know exactly where he'll be." Her phone buzzed. For a moment she didn't want to look. When she did, her stomach dropped. The first photo from Han filled the screen. The kids from the courtyard squeezed into the back of a van, faces pale, eyes wide. One of them tried to wave at the camera like this was some kind of game, confusion written all over his small face. The timestamp said now. The message below was simple. 1 hour gone, show me progress. Keanu stared at the image, jaw tight. He moved faster than he promised. "Of course he did," Sandra whispered. "Fear works better in advance." She shut off the screen, her hand shaking. "We find Minyi, we get those files out, we bring Han down, but if we fail..." Keanu finished for her, his voice rough. "If we fail, we don't get to ask who deserved saving. We'll know we left all of them behind." He picked up the cheap phone from the table, scrolling through recent calls. Nothing. Minyi hadn't risked reaching out to anyone. "Then we can't fail," Keanu said simply. Sandra closed the notebook with care, as if it were something fragile and holy. "To get to the servers," she said, "we'll have to go through Han's security without setting off alarms. That means we'll need more than borrowed faith." Keanu met her eyes. "I still have 1 or 2 people in that world who owe me a favor." And you trust them? She asked. No, he said, but I trust who I am now more than who I was with them. That has to be enough. Outside, the church's worn bell told the hour, echoing through the hollow walls as if counting with Hand's clock. Sandra slipped the notebook into her jacket, took one last look at the room where her brother had risked being seen, and turned back toward the night. Just as another message vibrated through her phone, this one a grainy video of her mother's hospital room door quietly closing from the outside. Rain began to fall as they drove toward the docks, a thin, cold drizzle that turned streetlights into blurry halos. Keanu's old contact met them in a dimly lit parking lot 2 blocks from the shipping yard. A stocky man in a faded bomber jacket, smoking like the world hadn't changed since the 90s. You look terrible, the man said without affection. Retirement doesn't suit you. Good to see you too, Jin, Keanu replied. His voice stayed calm, but Sandra felt the current his body carried, the way his muscles stayed ready without looking it. Jin's gaze flicked to her. This the conscience everyone keeps talking about. Sandra bristled, but Keanu's hand on her arm was a quiet reminder, choose the fights that matter. We need access to Hand's cold storage building, Keanu said. Backside, quietly. Jin snorted. Nobody gets in there, not even most of his own guys. You did, Keanu said. Once, the night we moved the Phuket accounts, you showed me the service tunnel. A flicker of memory crossed Jin's face. For a moment he looked almost human. That tunnel's probably bricked up by now. Probably, Keanu agreed. Or maybe Han got lazy like he does when he thinks fear's doing the heavy lifting. Jin hesitated, then dropped his cigarette and crushed it under his heel. You're going against him, really against him. It wasn't a question. Keanu nodded. I'm not asking you to join me, just point me in the right direction. Jin studied him, then glanced at Sandra. Whatever he saw in their eyes, fear, resolve, something heavier, seemed to settle something. He exhaled. There's a drain under Dock 7, ties into the old tunnel. You'll get maybe 10 minutes before the cameras notice a gap. He tossed Keanu a keycard. This still kills the exterior alarm, once. Why help us? Sandra asked quietly. Jin shrugged, the motion weighed down by more than muscle. I got a kid now, 8 years old. He asked me last week what I'd do. I didn't like hearing the answer out loud. He met Keanu's gaze. Don't make me regret this. They slipped into the shadows of the docks, the rain hiding their footsteps. Under Dock 7, the drain was exactly where Jin had said. Rusted grate, stale water, the faint smell of oil and salt. Keanu pried it open, and they climbed down into the dark. The tunnel was narrow and slick, forcing them to move sideways. Water soaked their shoes, cold biting through their clothes. After several turns, a faint hum reached them. Servers, air conditioning, the simple sound of power doing what it was told. At the end of the tunnel, a metal door waited. Keanu swiped the keycard. For a second, nothing happened. Then a soft green light blinked. The lock clicked open. Inside, the server room was a world of blue light and quiet mechanical breathing. Racks of hardware climbed toward the ceiling, blinking slowly like a field of artificial stars. In the center of it all, hunched over a terminal, sat a young man with familiar shoulders and a too thin frame. Minyi, Sandra whispered. He turned, startled. For a heartbeat, disbelief froze his features. Then recognition flooded them, and everything else, fear, calculation, anger, fell away. No, he breathed, stepping toward her. No, you weren't supposed to. Sandra crossed the space in 3 strides and pulled him into a fierce hug. He resisted for half a second, then clung to her like a drowning man. His shoulders shook once against her. You're alive, she whispered into his hair. You idiot, you're alive. He pulled back, eyes bright. I told you to stay out. I left the notebook for if you were still, but I never wanted. Han has mom, she cut in. And the kids from the center, all of them, 24 hours, less now. Minyi's face hardened in an instant. Of course he does. He always liked leverage. He noticed Keanu then, taking him in with quick, assessing eyes. You're the mechanic, he said. The ex-soldier. She talks about you in her notes. Sandra blinked. You read my reports. They made me, he said quietly. When I was still useful. A muscle twitched in his jaw. After the operation went bad, they blamed you, called you reckless, emotional. But all I saw was you trying to do the right thing in a system that didn't want right, just quiet. Keanu stepped forward. We don't have much time. Can your leak hurt hand fast enough to matter? Minyi nodded toward the terminal. The files are ready. Accounts, deals, every dirty cop and judge he's bought. It's not just him. It's the whole web. Then why haven't you pushed send? Sandra asked. Because if I expose them without a plan, they'll burn everything, Minyi said. Han has contingencies. Bombs, blackmail, people on the edge who only need a reason to pull a trigger. They'll start a war in the neighborhoods that have already suffered the most. Keanu's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, another image. This time the community center, kids being herded into the gym. The text, tick-tock. We're out of time for perfect plans, Keanu said. Minyi looked between them, guilt carving deep lines in his young face. I was going to turn myself in after I sent the files, he said softly. Testify, go to prison if I had to, pay for what I did working for him in the beginning, he swallowed. I deserve that. Sandra grabbed his shoulders. You were a scared kid trying to keep us both alive. That doesn't make you clean, but it doesn't make you him. He met her gaze. It makes me useful, to Han, to the people who want him gone. I'm tired of being a tool passed back and forth between monsters who wear different suits. Silence hung between the three of them, heavy and electric. What if, Keanu said slowly, you stop being a tool and become a fuse instead? They both looked at him. You let Han think he wins, Keanu continued. We tell him we have you, we set a meeting. While he waits for you to walk through his door, you push send. The files go everywhere. At the same time, someone on the inside moves to lock him down before he can clean up. And who exactly do we trust on the inside? Minyi asked. Sandra's throat tightened. There's one man. My old handler, Ruiz. He was the only one who fought to keep you in witness protection instead of throwing you to the wolves. I walked away from him, but he never walked away from the case. If he's still clean, Keanu said, then he's been waiting for something exactly like what you have. They all knew the risk. If Ruiz was dirty now, calling him would hand their lives to the same machine that had chewed them up before. But if they did nothing, the outcome was already written. Minyi glanced at the monitors, blinking with running code. You understand that once this goes live, there's no turning back, he said. No more quiet lives, no more pretending the past is gone. Keanu looked at him, then at Sandra. Kind of seems like the past didn't get that memo anyway. Sandra took out her phone with a steady hand. I'll call Ruiz, she said. But if he so much as hesitates in the wrong way, we disappear and trigger this on our own. Before she could dial, red lights flashed to life along the ceiling. A low alarm began to hum, growing louder by the second. Minyi swore under his breath. They know we're here. On the monitor, security camera feeds flicked through angles. Dark figures moved in the corridors, converging on the server room. Keanu stepped between the siblings and the door, muscles coiled, eyes gone cold with an old kind of focus he had hoped never to wear again. You two get that upload ready and find me a way out, he said, voice calm despite the sirens starting to scream. I'll buy us whatever time kindness is worth in a place like this. Sandra reached for his arm. Keanu. He met her gaze, something fierce and gentle burning there. I'm not the weapon he made me, he said quietly. But I remember how he thinks. Let me use that one last time. The server room door shuddered as the first heavy fist slammed against it from the other side. And as the lock began to crack, Sandra realized that every second from here on would be borrowed from courage itself. The door burst inward with a crack of metal and splintering frame. Han's men flooded the threshold, black figures against the blue server light. Keanu moved before they could raise their weapons, grabbing the nearest one by the wrist, twisting the gun free and slamming him sideways into the second. The shot went high, chewing into ceiling tiles instead of flesh. He didn't aim to kill. Every strike dropped a man's legs, broke a grip, knocked breath out of lungs. Years of violence repurposed into something that looked almost like mercy. Behind him, Minyi's fingers flew over the keyboard. "Rerouting through 3 proxies," he muttered. "Give me 60 seconds and a prayer." "Take 90, Keanu grunted, ducking a wild swing. He swept a chair low, tangling 2 more sets of feet. The third man squeezed off a shot that grazed Keanu's arm, heat and pain blooming sharp and bright. He hissed, more annoyed than afraid. Pain was familiar. Failure was not an option. Sandra grabbed a fallen pistol, checked the safety, and leveled it with steady hands. "Back up," she snapped at the nearest thug, eyes hard. "I really don't want to shoot you, don't make me." The man hesitated, seeing something in her that made him lower his weapon an inch. That split second of doubt was all Keanu needed to slam him into the rack and drop him unconscious. More footsteps thundered down the corridor. "We can't hold this forever," Sandra warned. "We don't need forever," Minyi said, voice tight. "We just need now." He hit enter on the terminal. On screen, a progress bar surged forward, then fragmented into dozens of smaller lines. "Payload split to every major news outlet, encrypted drop, and 3 international agencies," he said. "If one fails, the others pick it up." Keanu grabbed a metal stool and jammed it under the door handle as a makeshift brace. "Tell me that was the hard part." "The hard part is surviving the next 10 minutes, Minyi answered. "We need a clean line to call Ruiz and something resembling cover." Sandra scanned the room, eyes landing on a maintenance hatch near the floor. "Where does that go?" "Cooling access," Minyi said. "Probably to the drainage system." "Good," Keanu said. "We like drains." They shoved the hatch open. Cold air rushed in, damp and metallic. Minyi slid his backup drive into his pocket and squeezed into the narrow space. Sandra followed. Keanu hesitated only long enough to shove a server rack sideways, blocking half the doorway. "Go," Sandra urged. He dropped into the hatch just as the door gave way behind him, bullets ripping into the machinery where his head had been seconds before. The crawl space was tight and dark. Water dripped somewhere ahead. Behind them, angry voices echoed, muffled but chasing. Sandra's phone buzzed as they crawled. She answered on speaker, her voice low. "Ruiz." Static, then a weary, familiar tone. "Alvarez, I'd say it's good to hear your voice, but the last time I picked up a call like this, my career almost ended." "Mine did," she said. "Listen, we don't have time for apologies. Hans' ledgers are in play. My brother has copies. We're pushing them out now." A long pause. "You're with your brother?" "Yes," Minyi cut in. "And I'm done hiding. But Han has hostages, the kids, my mother. He'll blow them all to hell when he realizes what we've done." Another pause, and this one hurt. Then Ruiz sighed. "You were right about him, Alvarez. We've been building a case for years, but everyone above me keeps asking for more. More proof, more time. Meanwhile, bodies pile up. Tell me what you have." Minyi rattled off server addresses, drop locations, hash codes. Ruiz listened, then swore softly. "If even half of that is real, this isn't just Han. This is half the city's underbelly in one file." "It's real," Sandra said. "We need you to move now, lock down Han before he can light the match." "You think I don't want that?" Ruiz snapped, then forced his voice calm. "We can't just roll in with sirens. He'll kill the hostages before we hit the lobby. I need him distracted. I need him believing he's still holding the cards." Keanu's stomach tightened. He knew what was coming before Ruiz said it. "Can you make him think you're bringing him the brother?" Ruiz asked quietly. Sandra's eyes snapped to Keanu in the dim tunnel. Minyi shook his head. "No, he'll kill me on sight." "He'll kill you when this leak hits anyway," Keanu said, voice low. "Unless he's already in cuffs." "No," Sandra hissed. "Absolutely not." Keanu met her gaze, his own steady. "He wants me obedient. He wants you broken. He wants Minyi delivered. We can't give him all 3, but we can give him one convincing lie." "That's suicide," she said. "You walk in there, he'll—" "I used to be his favorite problem solver," Keanu cut in gently. "He won't waste that without a speech first. Men like him never do. I can use that time." "Keanu—" He touched her cheek, thumb brushing away a streak of dirt. "I spent years hurting people for him. Then I spent 3 trying to fix things 1 car at a time. Maybe this is how those 2 lives finally make sense together." Silence filled the tunnel, thick with fear and love and the unwelcome clarity of having no good options. Minyi swallowed hard. "If you go, I go," he said. "He wants me, not you." Keanu shook his head. "If you go, this ends with your body on that office floor and hand back in business in 6 months under a different name. We're not trading one dead brother for another. Not again." Sandra closed her eyes for a moment, fighting tears. When she opened them, they were clear, shining, resolute. "If you're doing this, we're not sending you in blind," she said. "Ruiz, can you get a team in position around Han's tower fast?" "We're already moving," Ruiz answered. "But we'll need a signal, something we'll hear from the bugs we've got in his office. He doesn't know they're live again." Keanu thought for a second. "When I say, 'I'm done fixing your mess,' that's your cue. Hit him hard. And if I don't say it." Ruiz didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. They emerged from the drainage pipe near the edge of the docks, the city glittering beyond the water. Keanu's arm throbbed where the bullet had grazed him, blood soaking into his sleeve. Sandra tore a strip from her shirt and wrapped it around his wound with careful hands. "You come back to me," she whispered as she tied the knot. "Or I swear I will drag you out of hell myself and make you regret leaving." He smiled, small and tired and real. "That's what I love about you. Your motivational speeches are terrifying." They took one of Jin's unmarked cars from a side street. Keanu slid behind the wheel and adjusted the mirror. His own reflection stared back. Older, scarred, but not the same man who had once driven through this city with blood on his hands and no remorse in his chest. He turned to Minyi and handed him a small, familiar object. A pair of glasses from the photo Han had shown. "Keep uploading. Stay with Sandra. You two make sure the world sees what he did." Minyi took the glasses, fingers trembling. "You really think you can play him?" "I don't know," Keanu admitted. "But I know I'd rather walk into that office on my feet than spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have stopped him." Sandra leaned in and kissed him, a fierce, desperate press of lips that tasted like salt and rain and everything they'd almost had time for. "Don't you dare make this our goodbye," she whispered. He rested his forehead against hers for one breath, then pulled back. "I'll see you when the clock hits 0. As he drove away toward Han's tower, the phone buzzed again with another image he didn't open because he already knew what he would see. Hostages, fear, a city held in one man's fist. He tightened his grip on the wheel, the tower rising ahead like a dark crown against the sky. In his pocket, the countdown ticked past 3 hours, and with every passing second, the cost of failure grew heavy enough to crush the man he used to be. The lobby of Han's tower felt colder than before, though the air was the same. The receptionist didn't meet Keanu's eyes. The guards watched him like he was already a ghost. Somewhere above, sirens wailed faintly in the distance, too far away to mean anything yet. Han's assistant led him up without a word. The elevator hummed, smooth and relentless. Keanu checked the hidden Mike Ruiz's team had fed him through a disguised lapel pin. 1 tap for yes, 2 for no. He tapped once. The doors parted onto the familiar floor. Han sat at his desk as if he'd never moved, city lights framing him in cold gold. The pistol still rested beside the neat stacks of money, calm as a sleeping snake. "You're early," Han remarked, raising an eyebrow. "Efficient as always. Where is our guest of honor?" Keanu stepped forward and set Minyi's glasses on the edge of the desk. "He didn't make it." Han picked up the glasses, turning them in his fingers. "You killed him." "I stopped him from running," Keanu said, voice flat. "He chose a different way out." Han studied him for a long moment, searching his face. "Suicide," he mused. "Coward's exit, how very disappointing." "You wanted him alive," Keanu said. "You didn't say he had to be breathing forever." Han's gaze sharpened. For a heartbeat, they simply looked at each other. The man who believed control was the only language worth speaking, and the man who had once been fluent in it. "Do you know what I hate the most, Keanu?" Han asked softly. "Not betrayal, that is expected. No, I hate waste. Talent wasted on morality, time wasted on useless guilt." He stood, walking slowly around the desk until they were face to face. "You and Sandra had potential," he continued. You could have had everything. Instead, you chose an auto shop and a dying mother in a public hospital. Tell me, has your goodness bought you anything worth the price? Keanu thought of the kids at the center, greasy little hands holding wrenches, eyes lighting up when an engine roared back to life. He thought of Sandra's tired smile when she walked in after a double shift, the way peace had settled on his shoulders like a jacket that finally fit. Yes, he said simply. Han's smile was thin. You think kindness will save you now? No, Keanu replied, but it's the only reason I came back. Han's eyes narrowed at the way he said it, something flickering there, dangerous curiosity. What do you mean? Keanu let the words come slowly, each one chosen. I'm done fixing your mess. Down in the surveillance van 3 blocks away, Ruiz straightened, headphones pressed tight, hand flashing a signal to the strike team. That's it, he said. Move. On the roof of a half-abandoned building, Sandra and Minyi watched the live feed from hacked city cameras. At Keanu's words, Minyi hit the final command. All those fragmented progress bars converged, then exploded outward in a storm of digital light. Emails, cloud dumps, scheduled leaks, screens across the city and far beyond flickered as the files landed. Judges, officers, politicians, wire transfers, photos, voice recordings. The web around Han suddenly visible to anyone who dared look. Back in the office, Han's phone buzzed once, twice, then began to vibrate continuously as alert after alert came in. He glanced at the screen and the calm on his face cracked. What did you do? He asked quietly. What you were always scared I'd do, Keanu answered. I stopped letting you decide who gets to survive your mistakes. Han moved fast, faster than Keanu remembered. He grabbed the pistol from the desk and raised it, eyes full of sudden, cold rage. You think exposure changes anything? Han hissed. You think these people will let themselves fall? They will sacrifice you, your woman, your precious witnesses, every last child in that gym before they lose their power. He tapped a button on his own phone with his free hand. You thought I was bluffing about your little friends? I am not a man of empty threats. In the surveillance van, Ruiz's screens lit up with a new alarm. A separate signal had gone out from Han's tower, activating a remote system. Bomb triggers, one of the techs gasped. Multiple sites. The community center, Minnie whispered on the rooftop, reading the same data as it rolled across her laptop. He wired the building, not just hostages, everyone. For a moment, it felt like they had lost anyway. Then Ruiz's phone buzzed with a message from a local precinct. Evacuation in progress. You were right. Place was wired to blow. Sandra's breath left her in a rush she hadn't realized she was holding. They listened, she whispered. She had begged Ruiz before Keanu went in to trust her about one thing, move the kids first, then the evidence. Clear the center quietly as a drill, just in case. Ruiz had argued about resources, jurisdiction, but he had done it. Down at the center, parents and children stood shivering across the street, wrapped in foil blankets as bomb squads worked. 30 seconds after the last officer ducked behind cover, an explosion ripped through the empty building. Windows shattered, walls buckled, flames roared into the sky. But the screams that followed were of shock, not agony. Back in the office, Han waited for the distant boom. When it came, faint but unmistakable, he smiled, cruel and satisfied. You see, he said, in the end, something always burns, it's just a question of who. Keanu met his eyes, something like pity cutting through his anger. Look again, he said softly. Sirens wailed closer now, dozens of them. Helicopters thudded above. Out the window, Han's building lit up with flashing red and blue reflections as law enforcement vehicles boxed in the tower. Han moved to the window, confusion creasing his features as unit after unit poured into the plaza. Across every news channel on the bank of muted TVs, his own face appeared next to leaked documents and words like systemic, racketeering, conspiracy. He turned back to Keanu, realizing, too late, that his safety net had vanished. You think they're here for justice, he snapped. They're here for survival. They'll take me if they must, but they will devour you first to prove how righteous they are. Maybe, Keanu said, but I'm done living like that's the only story that can be told. Han raised the gun again, but this time Keanu was ready. As Han's finger tightened on the trigger, the weapon clicked uselessly. Earlier, when Han had picked up the glasses, Keanu's hand had brushed the pistol just long enough to thumb the magazine release. It lay now under the edge of the desk, a dull chunk of metal with no more power than any other piece of scrap. Keanu stepped in, grabbed Han's wrist, and twisted. The gun clattered to the floor. For a moment they struggled, the old dance of force and resistance. But Han had lived on power, not practice. Keanu had been lifting engines and parts, working with his hands every day. He pinned Han against the desk, breathing hard but refusing to land the final, fatal blow his muscles still remembered how to give. "Do it," Han spat, eyes wild. "Be who you are, end this clean." Keanu shook his head. "You don't get to write my ending." The office door burst open. Ruiz entered with a team in tactical gear, weapons raised. He took in the scene in one swift glance, hand pinned, gun on the floor, Keanu bleeding but standing. "For the record," Ruiz said almost softly, "you saved a lot of lives today." Keanu stepped back, letting the officers move in. Handcuffs snapped around Han's wrists. For the first time, the crime boss looked small. "You think prison will hold me?" Han snarled as they pulled him upright. Ruiz met his gaze with a tired, unblinking stare. "With what we just got on you, you're not walking out of a courtroom, much less a cell." They led Han away. As the door closed, the room seemed to exhale. Minutes later, the elevator opened again, and Sandra rushed in, rain-soaked and breathless, Minyi just behind her. She froze when she saw Keanu, alive, leaning against the desk with a bloodied sleeve and a weary smile. "You're late," he murmured. She crossed the room in a rush and threw her arms around him, holding on as if she could keep his heart beating by sheer will. He winced, then laughed quietly. "Careful, hero wounds." "You're an idiot," she whispered into his chest. "A brave, stubborn, ridiculous idiot." Minyi hovered near the door, eyes wet. "The kids?" Keanu asked. "Shaken but whole," Minyi said. "The center's gone, but no one was inside when it went up. Mom's with them, confused as hell but safe." Keanu sagged in Sandra's arms with relief. Ruiz stepped back into the office, paperwork already in his hands, the weight of a shifting world on his shoulders. "This isn't over," he warned. "Trials, appeals, media storms, you three are going to be targets for a while, angry associates, humiliated officials. Witness protection is on the table." Minyi looked at his sister, then at Keanu. "I'll testify," he said quietly. "All of it. If it helps keep this from happening again, I'll wear the handcuffs and the orange jumpsuit. I caused damage. I need to help fix it." Ruiz nodded, respect softening his features. "We can work with that." Sandra's throat tightened. "That means they'll move you far away," she said. "New name, no contact for a long time." Minyi gave her a lopsided smile that tried to be brave. "You found me once when the whole world was trying to bury us. You'll find me again." They hugged, a long, shaking embrace full of apologies and forgiveness that didn't need words. When they let go, something lighter seemed to pass between them. Pain, yes, but also the stubborn hope that comes from surviving what should have broken you. Months later, the auto shop reopened with a new sign above the bay door: Second Chance Motors and Youth Workshop. Keanu fixed cars during the day and taught teens to change oil and brake pads in the evenings. Sandra split her time between the shop, her mother's slow recovery, and a new role consulting for community programs, making sure nobody forgot how close the city had come to tearing itself apart. Every so often, a letter would arrive with no return address. Plain envelope. Inside, a few pages in Minyi's cramped handwriting, updates from somewhere else, anonymous but full of small victories. Classes he was taking, books he was reading, a kid in his block who reminded him of those at the old center. Keanu would read them aloud in the quiet of the office, his voice low, the hum of the shop in the background. The words always came back to the same simple truth. None of them were clean, but all of them were trying. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the skyline, casting long shadows across the garage, Sandra leaned against the doorway and watched Keanu hand a wrench to a shy 15-year-old girl who had just rebuilt her first engine. "You did it," Sandra said softly when the girl ran off to call her mom, grinning from ear to ear. You turned a place where people used to disappear into somewhere they get to show up as themselves. Keanu wiped his hands and shrugged, a little embarrassed. We did it, he answered. You, me, your brother, even Ruiz, and a whole lot of kids who decided not to give up on this city. She stepped closer, resting her head against his shoulder. You ever think about those 24 hours? She asked. Every day, he admitted, but not the way I used to. How then? He looked out at the bay door, open to the warm evening air. The city sounded different now, still messy, still loud, but less like a threat and more like a promise. I used to think they were a countdown to everything I loved being destroyed, he said quietly. Now I think they were just a reminder. Of what? He slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her closer, voice almost a whisper. That time doesn't decide who we are, he said. What we do with it does. The shop lights clicked off one by one as they closed up for the night. Outside, the city kept buzzing, full of people making choices big and small. Some kind, some cruel, most somewhere in between. Inside, in a little garage that smelled of oil and possibility, two people who had once been weapons stood together, scarred but unbroken, quietly choosing, again and again, to build instead of destroy. The clock on the wall ticked on, indifferent. But for the first time in a long time, every second felt less like a threat, and more like a second chance they had finally learned how to use.